Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. This is a decade-long rivalry at this point. The Saints and the Buccaneers do not like each other, and they have made it known over the last couple of years. There are subtle shots, and there are also not so subtle shots that we have seen over the last handful of years. The Buccaneers win this one big. You don't often see a lopsided score like this in such a rivalry, but they take this one 51-27 as the road team as well. So when we look at the top 5 graded players, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, running back Sean Tucker, number 1 on this list. No Rachaad White in this game. Tucker was filling in along with Bucky Irving. 92.4 overall grade in this game. Incredible performance for him. We'll dig into that. Cornerback Tykee Smith with an 89.0. Just looked like Peanut Tillman out there, just punching the ball out any chance he possibly got. Edge rusher Yaya Diaby with an 82.2. Running back Bucky Irving with an 81.4, and then wide receiver Chris Godwin a 77.2. Baker Mayfield in this one, 325 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions. He was very up and down. 56.6 is the overall grade that he ended up earning in this game. New Orleans Saints on their side of things, Trevor Penning, number 1 on the list. Look at that. All right.
Right tackle might be working for him.
Like to see it. 82.1. Safety Jordan Howden with a 75.1. Tight end Juwan Jennings with a 74.7. Offensive tackle Talise Fuanga with a 72.4. And then tight end Foster Moreau with a 72.2. Spencer Rattler getting the start for an injured Derek Carr in this game. In his first start, he earned a 64.8 overall grade. I thought Spencer was fine in this game. I really did. He struggled, but we figured that would be the case. It's tough going up against Todd Bowles' defense. It's tough going up against the defense and getting Kalijah Cansey back, getting Antoine Winfield Jr. back. It doesn't help that basically the first pass you throw it to Chris Olave, he gets popped, ball comes out, Antoine Winfield Jr. picks it up. Oops, all of a sudden now you're down 14 on the scoreboard. Like that does not help any rookie quarterback out.
It's a rough situation for darn sure with that.
So I thought that he had a really tough situation, but what do you think? What was the stat that told the story in this massive win for Tampa Bay?
Trevor, I just have to ask you, are the Bucs suddenly out of nowhere just a freight train that can't be stopped on the ground?
100%.
Is that what this is? Because they had 277 rushing yards to the Saints 82. And let me give you just the second half of this game. And the Bucs went into this game behind at halftime. Was it 27-24, I think it was? 27 carries in the second half for 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, and between those two guys, a 93.9 rushing grade in the second half of this game. I mean, that's just ridiculous. When is the last time we've ever seen the Bucs run the ball like this? What, since the days?
Been a long time,
since the days of Doug Martin, or what? I mean, honestly, they all of a sudden
maybe work done.
All of a sudden they're just a freight train. I mean, Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving just took the game completely over. The Tucker running people over, Irving slippery. We've been talking about him since the draft. They just made a statement coming out in the second half of this game, even though they were behind and their defense wasn't playing well. Credit to their defense, too, not giving up any points in the second half either. But the Bucs, out of nowhere, they just went into halftime and got pissed off and started running the ball. And it just never stopped. 220 yards in the second half alone is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I know, look, Sean Tucker, undrafted guy, Bucky Irving, a fourth-round guy. These two just, I mean, that's as dominant an effort from 2 running backs as you're almost ever going to see, especially in the second half.
Yeah, Dave Salfaro, our do-everything person here at PFF, found this stat on the fly right when the game was ending. Buccaneers' 10 rushes of 10 or more yards versus the Saints are the most that they've had in a single game in the PFF era. So since 2006, which is as far as our data goes back. Sean Tucker had 6, Bucky Irving had 2, Baker Mayfield had 1, and Sterling Shepard even got himself a rep there, getting 10 plus yards on a carry. So they were running the ball at will, which, that kind of leans into my most disappointing. I could just say that. It's the Saints' run defense. And when you look at the Saints' defensive line, it's part of what made projecting success for this team in the long term difficult, because it felt like they were the in-between. Like, you're sort of about to turn the page, but you're still hanging on to some vets. And certainly the first couple of weeks of the season, they were able to play well, but now we're looking back on those first 2 weeks, and it was Panthers with Bryce Young and a struggling Cowboys team. And so as they have played better competition, it's not like they got the doors blown off of them by the Kansas City Chiefs last week. I'm not trying to say that. I'm not trying to take everything away from this team. But it feels like they're sort of at an in-between here, and I feel that way about their defensive line. They have some young guys, they have some older guys, but it just doesn't seem to be gelling right now, especially in run defense. When you look at how they have played this season, 45.6 run defense grade as a team, and then, of course, against the Buccaneers, as you would suspect, it was worse. 38.4 run defense grade, which is 31st in the NFL, the only team that was worse was the Carolina Panthers, which we'll get back to in a little bit. But that was definitely disappointing to me. Baker Mayfield was the stat that told the story for me. And it's this Jekyll and Hyde act with Baker Mayfield that he cannot seem to escape. They win the game 51-27. I understand that. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Buccaneers. 325 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. But it's the variance that can kill you against the better teams that are going to be more consistent. Very first quarter for Baker Mayfield, 80.1 passing grade. Great. We're humming along. You love to see that. The script is working. Liam Cohen's in his bag. You're scoring multiple. You got multiple scoring drives in the first quarter. It's fantastic. Second quarter, he goes from an 80.1 passing grade to a 33.2. Like, it's just falling off a cliff. His 2 turnover-worthy plays came in the second quarter. New Orleans went on a huge run, scored 27 points in the second quarter, and a lot of that was just because all momentum was on their side because Mayfield was not able to stop that slide in the second quarter. They recalibrated in the second half, and obviously the Bucs win big, but to me it's just it's always going to be a thing with Mayfield. This is kind of just who the identity is. He could give you the highest highs, but man, that drop-off is so steep. And I wish the floor was a little bit higher for this group when it comes to when they're not playing well. But it just doesn't feel like that's the case. But so to me, that's sort of the stat that told the story, even within a blowout. Most impressive. Who do you got?
Most impressive, excuse me. I was going to go, my first instinct, because every week my first instinct tells me this, is to go with Chris Godwin.
You're right.
And I was going to do that, and then I took a look and I remembered, no, let me get a rookie in here. Tykee Smith, just fantastic stuff from him in the slot. He's really added a punch to the secondary because last year, really good at safety, obviously, with Winfield. Really good out wide last year. Pretty good with Davis and Dean on the outside, but they were struggling a little bit in the slot. Tykee Smith's been a revelation. Look, targeted 6 times in this game, allowed 2 catches for 19 yards. Punched a ball out like Charles Tillman would, forced fumble that led to the Winfield touchdown, had an interception, had another forced incompletion, and an 89 overall grade. He's figured it out over the last few weeks. Over the last 4 weeks, I think he's a top 10 corner in all of football by our grading right now. He's just been spectacular in the slot. I mean, you talk about the exact role that they brought him in to take on from Georgia. And he played a little bit of deep safety, too, at Georgia, but the Bucs don't really need that. You got Whitehead and Winfield back there. He's just been terrific. I mean, you talk about a guy who could maybe quietly – defensive rookie of the year right now is kind of wide open, right? We don't have a lot of standouts. Kamari Lassiter's pretty good. Jared Verse has been pretty good, but maybe Tykee Smith's a guy who can work his way into that equation because he's playing fantastic football in the slot for them.
No, there is no doubt about it. He is playing fantastic. We got some people in the chat kind of wanted to talk about Spencer Rattler a little bit. We touched on him at the very top of this conversation, but again, I thought that Spencer played well. 64.7 overall grade for us, and people were like, whoa, wait a second, you've got him graded higher than Baker? Yes, because he was more consistent, where Baker had the big time up and down, and his common stats obviously look better. The overall performance, I think the floor of Spencer Rattler was a little bit higher. And it's tough. Like I said, you go down immediately 14-0. You lose Chris Olave immediately. You basically have to abandon the run in the second half because Tampa is getting up so many points. So it was a really tough script for him to follow, not to mention the interior offensive line being ravaged, and so you're getting a lot of pressure there as well up the middle. So I think given the circumstances, Rattler played fine. There were some things that he did well. He had one big-time throw. He had the 2 turnover-worthy plays. His adjusted completion percentage was above 70%. He took 5 sacks, but again, it's a really beat-up offensive line. And he had 3 drops in this game. And again, you're playing without Chris Olave, so it's tough. It was really tough in that regard. So given the circumstance, I thought that he was fine. Any Rattler takes before I get to my most impressive?
No, it's just a tough assignment. It's hard enough in your first NFL start when you're going against Todd Bowles because we know how he is against young and rookie quarterbacks. But to fall behind 14-0, you can't sit here and say that Rattler was the reason they lost this game. They gave up 50,
Yes.
They gave up 51 points.
Right. I agree with you. My most impressive, it has to be Sean Tucker, man. With no Rashad White in this game.
Our guy Max Chadwick's loving you right now.
He should, and you know what? It's well deserved here for Sean Tucker and Max loving Sean Tucker as well, especially when he was coming through the draft. What was that? Was that he was the Bijan year, right? Because I think I had Bijan Robinson as like RB1 at one point. And then I had Sean Tucker as RB2 because of a fantastic sophomore season that he had. And he just didn't look like the same guy as junior year, so I didn't really know what to think. But the speed, power, build, ability to play off of contact, like all that was pretty dang good for him. And we saw 136 rushing yards on 14 carries yesterday, but also 3 catches on 3 targets, 56 yards and a receiving touchdown. So he got into the end zone twice, had those 6 explosive runs that I mentioned. He was fantastic, man. He was a big reason why the Bucs were able to have a big day because of how just explosive that he was. Everybody thought that it was just going to be Bucky Irving and that was going to be it, but they were truly able to lean on the run game in a big way, especially in the fourth quarter when they were sort of like supposed to be salting away the game. They kept moving the chains. They kept scoring because their run game was so successful yesterday. So credit to those guys and even the offensive line up front just being able to punch the Saints straight in the mouth, and I thought that was big for him.
Absolutely. I mean, you talk about I remember watching Tucker back at Syracuse, and I think I got to grade at least a couple of games of his doing the Cuse games back when I was doing that. He just looked like an NFL running back. It was it was a little weird to me that he went undrafted. I actually thought he would get drafted by somebody, but he's big and he's fast. I mean, there's no question about that. Back then he had to work on the vision a little bit, but he's always had the tools to succeed like this. And if he's going to be that big compliment to Irving, and even when Rachaad White gets back, I think Tucker has a role because he's just built differently than those guys.
We've got an ongoing question in the chat right now. If you're just tuning into the show, Emmanuel Forbes, healthy scratch for the Washington Commanders this past week. Probably a trade candidate. We're going to talk about some trade deadline guys over, I think, in the next couple of weeks. So an easy way to give you a question here is where could he be traded? Who's somebody who needs a cornerback? A couple of people are saying the Houston Texans honestly could be a spot for him. I know they got Laster. They've got Derek Stingley Jr., but wouldn't be a bad flyer to take if you get to just throw a day 3 pick at him and be like, hey, let's get this guy on the team and see what happens. So
I kind of like that as a system fit too.
Yeah,
it might be a better defense for him.
I don't hate it with the Houston Texans. NGA saying trade him to Carolina, Forbes, and a 3rd or a 4th rounder for J.C. Horn. Oh,
I don't hate that. I almost wonder about if Washington needs one more receiver too. Could he be a piece in a Amari Cooper trade, something like that?
What are you saying? Like
Forbes, like if you did Forbes and a 5th for Amari Cooper.
Oh, well, I don't know if the Browns would do that specifically, but that's very interesting. Potentially getting a receiver back.
Or some other receiver as just a piece to get something that could help them in a playoff run.
I see what you're saying. Ooh, Vikings a suggestion. They need some depth at corner.
It's a thought.
Chargers.
Any team who needs a corner. Anybody.
It's very interesting.